Dermot, Breen, Rory, and Kira have been training for their role as the next generation of the coven of sorcerers known as the Driacht. But their training will have to wait. War is upon Denu. Dark forces, loyal to the evil sorcerer Tyrannus, are on the rampage. They make new allies, including Denu's royal family, one of whom seems familiar to Dermot. The Driacht must now take different paths to save lives and uphold the people's morale. For Dermot and his friends, they will embark upon a series of adventures that will teach them what it means to be a Driador. Meanwhile, Tyrannus has enslaved Dermot and Brienne's father. Will the brothers see him or their mother again? Before a tremendous battle begins, many secrets long kept deep shall finally surface. Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor. As you might have been able to tell, both from the title of this video and from the fact that I started it by reading out a synopsis, today's video will be another book review. And the book in question this time will be, wait a second, I'm going to have to pick you up for this, as usual, Beneath the Deep Wave. So yeah, I'm getting back to the One with Nature series, this time by looking at the second book. It is somewhat funny to consider the fact that when I reviewed the first book a year ago, I made some comments about how its author, Andrew McDowell, seemed to have disappeared, and then a few months after that, I find out that this book has been published, which, not gonna lie, I found to be at least for me, quite amusing. I should probably make inferences about authors disappearing a little bit more often. That might activate them again. Might. Anyway, coincidences surrounding me aside, what can I say about the about this book itself? Well, the summary of my review, or the Too Long Didn't Watch (TLDW), is that how there are certain certain books or certain stories that cover medievalist fantasy, with the occasional example from Sword and Sandals fantasy, despite professing or even demonstrating more progressive values, end up having a significant fascist following, which very much touts and praises these books as an endorsement to their particular politics and worldview. That's kind of the impression I'm left with after having read through this book. Not that it is fascist, but that it is very vulnerable to fascist co-opting, because it hasn't really done enough to negate that potential message, and it hasn't done anything. It hasn't done much in that direction, because it doesn't really have a lot within itself in order to really establish its own identity, its own imagery, or really its own distinctive concepts. So yeah, pretty much everything that is in this book can be found in some variant in something else, and there isn't really a distinctive spin to it, as it would be in some other stories. Which I have to say I find myself a little bit disappointed by. The presentation of the book is quite well, and is quite interesting. Andrew knows how to catch the reader's attention and how to focus it, but he doesn't really have a lot of aspects to focus that attention upon, unfortunately, which ultimately leaves this book coming across as more hollow than I think he intended to, particularly for readers like me who are looking for stuff like themes or symbolism, or in general, like broader connective tissue that makes that would make the story stand out. If, however, you are a more casual fantasy reader and are more interested in the moment by moment events of the book, whether and how interesting they are, or how well they come across, it is quite likely that you will enjoy this book for what it is. And now that I'm done with the general impressions, it's time I delve a little bit into the specifics. The plot of this book picks up sometime after the ending of the first one, with the lead cast, or more precisely, the younger half of the lead cast, the trainees, who are also named in the synopsis, having since progressed through their training, and as they get to demonstrate their abilities, however, they find out that the main villain of the story ends up has resurfaced recently, and therefore they have to step up in order to contain the damage that he presents. Another faction that is forced to act in the same manner is actually the royal family of the Kingdom of Denu, which is the primary setting of this book. And due to them having a common enemy, the leads end up team up with Denu's royal family, and because they realize that is the best way they can ensure the security and care of the nation, and of the nation, which means both people and nature. So yeah, the premise of this book is quite solid as it stands. You could build an interesting story out of that. However, I'm afraid that the broader plot isn't doesn't really effectively capitalize on the on the various elements that would that could effectively fulfill that premise. I talked about how the lead characters, or the younger half of the main cast, is in training, and there is in training in order to take on a broader responsibility towards the natural world. However, when it comes to looking at the lead cast, it is really only Dermot, who was who's more or less the protagonist of the previous book, who really gets to showcase what it is that he has been able to learn, occasionally backed up by his younger brother. The other half of the trainee group, Rory and Kira, do not really get any similar moments to shine. The most they get is when they get to do some exposition dumping, because it is important for the other characters to know one particular thing in order to move the story ahead. So yeah, even though they are also supposedly getting a level of education and training, the way in which that is revealed is somewhat disappointing. But if we really want to talk about, however, the biggest disappointment of this book comes from the royal family. The Crown Prince is an interesting character in and of himself, and he is engaging to follow, and is able to build more meaningful connections both with the audience and with the rest of the cast. So he's fine, but the rest of the royal court is not particularly interesting. In fact, they seem to be very much constructed upon archetypes that you've seen in such stories several times by now. There is so aside from the Crown Prince, who is the one good character within this group, you have a rebellious princess who, shock of all shocks, has fallen in love with someone she isn't supposed to, and who also has something of a not as clean cut lineage as one might expect. There is a benevolent king who unfortunately finds himself overwhelmed by the crisis at hand, and also there is an evil advisor. I will credit Andrew for making the advisor a little bit more subtle, at least in the beginning. However, I cannot extend any more credit, because these four people I've mentioned are the entirety of the royal court. Well, okay, I think there are some some servants and soldiers that are presented there, but nothing. But however, when it comes to named characters, it's just these four. So yeah, King's Landing. This is not, and not that I expected it to be King's Landing, but I still expected there to be more people who would fulfill more functions, because I'm not exactly sure how this kingdom is supposed to work. What are the functional connections it relies upon in order to get the in order to get the in order to get itself working, in order to maintain itself. That is something this book doesn't. That is something this book doesn't really address, even though it very much touches upon the difficulties that result from the way in which this kingdom is. Even though it touches upon the stress that this kingdom has to contend with. It is a little bit more concerned with building up the emotional connections rather than the functional connections that would result from a story such as this. And because of that, the world building is quite slim as well. There are forests. There is wildlife, and from that wildlife, there are certain characters that show up again and again. However, they are just there. They don't really tell me anything about the rest of the setting, and about how they or about how these are connected, or about how in a broader sense the world is really supposed to work. It is so yeah. As I said, the world building. So as I might have hinted at already, the world building is is unfortunately very slim. And if I even though the plot chugs along from one plot point to the next, and there is some character work that occurs, a lot of it is not a lot of it will really stick with the reader. It'll just much of it will just pass by. Will just pass by, and I will say the presentation helps very much with the reading experience, because Andrew knows what to focus upon, and therefore how to direct the reader's attention. However, in hindsight, you realize that that the various moments of the plot are still somewhat hollow, and while you enjoy the ride, there isn't really enough within the ride to really make it memorable. I think the thing most people will remember from this book is the reveals of who is related to whom. Andrew might have intended those to, might have intended those in order to highlight the tragedy of certain characters, and maybe even demonstrate the importance of freedom of assembly and of caring for each other. However, I think that message came through much more cleanly in the first book, when he was talking about the plight of the various refugees that were created in the aftermath of the tragedies presented. In this book, it really comes across more as a reveal for the sake of having a reveal, and for that impact. And unfortunately, that also leads to a lot of potential for fascist co-opting, because it seems to place an excessive emphasis on bloodline, and on what having a specific lineage means to the individual characters. And that is something that is done both by the good guys and the bad guys. So it's not just this isn't something that's brought up to be countered. It's brought up because it's supposed to be meaningful in universe. Another thing that's brought up because it's supposed to be meaningful in universe is the importance of tradition and of various rituals. However, those those traditions in and of themselves aren't really explained for their or presented for their utility. They are simply presented as being good because they are good, not because they fulfill some kind of secondary meaning. Again, this is one where he could have delved a little bit deeper into stuff like freedom of assembly, or what it means to have, or what it means for a group of people to have something that brings them together. Unfortunately, it is another missed opportunity within this book. Overall, even though Andrew has a good idea of where and how to guide the reader's attention in order to deliver a fulfilling story, he doesn't really focus upon building many of the elements that would really help elevate this story, and he instead has to rely on twists and developments and the various other such reveals in order to build in order to give an impression of meaning, rather than trying to deploy the elements that he could involve within the narrative in order to effectively create that meaning. My final rating for Beneath the Deep Wave is a 3 out of 5. And that was my review. Thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed it, well then please like the video, maybe even share it wherever you think other people will also like the video. If there is anything you'd like to add, either to the book itself or to my review of it, that's what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe, and ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. My books, the first of my own Heir to the Empire series, The Next Generation and The Path Not Taken, are available at various book retailers under their respective master links in the description down below, right past my social media links, which I also suggest to check out should you choose to. I also have a second channel where you can hear me talking about whatever else crosses my mind, though I think it'll typically be related to movies, TV shows, or other kind of narratives presented outside of the printed word medium. If you are more interested on my thoughts on the printed word medium, then I suggest you stay on this channel and go through my extensive backlog of book reviews, writing advice, and miscellaneous connected topics. If none of those interest you, then I suggest you go ahead and do whatever you want the rest of your day, because it is your day after all. And yeah, that was all from me. So until next time, I am Jonathan Taylor, and this has been the Heir's Lair.